Okay, you can see that here. Adjust the microphone if you need to. Here.
Did you want the mic?
No, I'll be here. And you can put this video on.
Thanks, yeah. Oh, no, that should be fine. Thank you.
Very good.
Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti 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 Om. Good. Welcome to you all, and a very special welcome to my dear friend, who I have to introduce him. There's no other way to introduce Swami Advayatmananda, who is, of course, much more than my dear friend, but we have been close friends since 1981. That's 44 years.
Yeah.
What has happened?
I think it's called time.
Oh! Yeah, but time is Maya, isn't it? Mithya. Anyway, bad joke. Anyway, I'll give you a very brief introduction because we want to hear from Swamiji. We were brought together actually by Puja Swami Dayananda when in 1981 he came to Santa Barbara, California, where we are both living. And we both came to attend Swamiji's lectures. After the lectures, then one of his senior disciples stayed in Santa Barbara and taught us Vedanta and Sanskrit. We were both co-students. In fact, Swamiji had actually finished a degree in religious studies at that time and was already studying Sanskrit. So he was already deeply engaged. And then after Then for many years we had a study group. We met several times a week. We were very dedicated, very dedicated. And then in 1986, we both left Santa Barbara, California, to go to this little town in the Poconos of Pennsylvania, Salisbury, and we were both students in Puja Swamiji's 3-year course there. After the course, and throughout that period of time, for a good many years, we were extremely close. Extremely close means we're together, we're like brothers, actually. I don't think we look like brothers, but you get the idea. After the course, then we parted our ways. Swamiji, actually, he got a degree in computer science or information science, and had a very successful career in the computer field. I remember you had worked at Hewlett Packard for many years, and he did extremely well, which is hardly surprising because he is who he is. And apparently through the whole and something I didn't know is through the whole time he was at Hewlett Packard, he was continuing his studies, both of Advaita Vedanta and Sanskrit, so that when he finally took early retirement, and then Puja Swamiji initiated him as a sannyasi in what year?
About 10 years ago.
10 years ago, initiated as a sannyasi. And then Swamiji began teaching, and with his continued study and meditation, nididhyasana contemplation, he became, I think, an extremely skillful teacher. I've watched some videos of him teaching. I'm really, really quite impressed. And I'm delighted that Swamiji has agreed to come and address us this morning. I've asked Swamiji to do two things, which is a little tricky. It's like having having 2 feet, one in two different boats. So I've asked him to both teach some solid Vedanta. I've also asked him to recount some of the experiences we had early on, perhaps in Santa Barbara, California, and later in the Sailorsburg ashram. So Swamiji, please address us now.
Thank you, Swamiji. Thank you for that generous introduction. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, good. Namasarvebhyaha. Welcome to everyone here. It's such a pleasure to be here. Again, thank you for the invitation. Sometimes the Sanskrit names are difficult to pronounce. So in this Arsha Parampara, we sometimes use abbreviations like Swami Advayatmananda, Swami V, Swami Tattvavidananda, Swami TV, Swami Tadatmananda, Swami T. So has anybody heard of Happy Days, the television show? So I'm known around the Gurukulam as Swami A. like the Fonz, right? Like Arthur Fonzarelli. So just call me Swami A. And when I was invited to speak here, I thought, what can I possibly say that Swamiji has not already said with great clarity? And I thought, there's little that I could say. But as Swamiji said, we've known each other since 1981. And I thought, does Swamiji know the risk he's taking by inviting me? I've known him for a very long time. And then I searched my memory, and I realized there are no untoward stories that I could tell that would anyway embarrass him at all. I was not going to mention the hot tub. Okay, good. I wasn't going to, just out of respect, Swamiji, that was the one thing that came to mind. Because there's a Tamil verse. I don't know Tamil. And so this is my own rendition is, Nadi Mulam, Rishi Mulam na vicharayet. One should not interrogate or inquire into the origin of a river or the origin of a sage. I don't know why you not want to look into the origin of a river. But it's sometimes considered inappropriate for a shishya to ask about the purvashrama, a sannyasi's previous life, etc. And one way to think about this is that a sannyasi technically is an ahistorical entity. So, the jiva, the individual, suffers through the Shatbhava Vikaras, the way life is traditionally presented, through Jayate. An individual is born asti. He abides as a limited individual. Vardate, one grows. Viparinamate, one transforms. Apakshiyate, one declines. Vinashyati, one passes on. Right? At the time of sannyasa diksha, the historical jiva has floated downstream. When you take sannyasa, you actually do your own shraddha, not to be confused with shraddha. You actually do your own death ceremony. And when you take sannyasa, it's just an extraordinary, you spend all night making offerings, chanting Gayatri, making offerings in the fire, and before you're given the name and the mantra diksha, you go down to the Ganga. And when I was given sannyasa, there's a book called Sannyasa Paddhati, which is the handbook and how the rituals proceed when one takes sannyasa. And there's two different ways to take sannyasa. Actually, there's three. There's apata sannyasa, which is how Adi Shankaracharya took it. At a time of distress, you can take it, But two different ways. There's Vividisha sannyasa, which I'm sure many of you have heard about, and Vidvat sannyasa. Vividisha, san anta word. It means you can take it as one who desires knowledge. So sannyasa is an adoption of intentional adoption of a very simple lifestyle for the sake of study, teaching, and contemplation. In Western monastic traditions, a monk, is termed a contemplative, which is part of the job description of a sannyasi, right? And so for one who wants to focus on this, have no distractions, and make this their living reality, one may take sannyasa. And then the other type is vidvat sannyasa, one who has this knowledge and has no other interest in anything else, just wants to live a quiet life and perhaps study or teach, whatnot. And this sannyasa paddhati, I looked at, and there's two approaches. So if someone is taking vividisha sannyasa, meaning that one has to study more, then when you go to the Ganga and you strip off all your clothes and you let them float downstream, all your shuklambara, all your white clothes float downstream. You take your yajnapavitam, your sacred thread, and you rip it off and you let that float downstream, because you're no longer qualified. You're officially dead. Your jiva is gone, and you're no longer qualified to do any Vedic rituals. So all the jivatvam, your individuality that you were before, is symbolically floats downstream. I think Swamiji even took journals and destroyed them, burnt them, or in the Ganga, offered them into the Ganga, because that represents the historical, I won't even say your Purvashraman name, the historical entity, right? So all that is gone, right? And then for someone taking Vividisha sannyasa, you take 3 dips in the Ganga, trying very hard not to be pulled down and away into the Ganga. I've heard of somebody who has taken sannyasa and got pulled into the Ganga, and that was his last thing he did. In a way, it seems ironic. In another way, what better way to go? Right? But if you're taking Vividisha sannyasa, you take the dips, it's cold, and you turn towards north, which represents moksha, and you're supposed to start walking. But in this type of sannyasa, your gurubhais call you back and say, no, there's more seva to do, there's more guru seva to do, there's more things to do, come back. And then that's when they give you the clothing and the orange robes. And I remember the fellow the sannyasi who arranged the logistics of the sannyasa diksha. He kind of sidled up to me and said, do you know how to wear a kalpina? Do you know how to wear a loincloth? Because, I probably didn't look like someone who knew. And I said, yes, of course. Because, they just give you this piece of cloth and say, you're standing there naked in front of God and the world, and it's good to know that. And I knew how to do it because I'd practiced. And so sure I did. So they give you this loincloth and the orange robes. The first thought I had was, I'm wearing Puja Swamiji's clothes. It's just extraordinary, utterly transformative. If you're taking vidvat sannyasa, if you're considered someone who knows, if you're jnani and you're taking sannyasa, when you take that dip and you turn north, the handbook says, you're standing there naked, you start walking north, and the handbook says, just let them go. They'll find their way to Kashi, Varanasi, and they can beg on the street for alms. It's a very romantic vision of sannyasa. I don't know how many people actually end up wandering as a natural digambaram on their way to Kashi. But you can see that a sannyasi is in one way technically an ahistorical entity. And that's because, in my mind, Atma is ahistorical, right? And for one who knows oneself, one considers oneself kalatitaha, naturally transcended. Some people ask, how do I transcend time? There's no effort, there's no yatna. There's a beautiful section in chapter 18, verse 50, some of the bhashya that I've shared in so many of my classes, where Shankaracharya in his commentary says that the self is suvijnayam, absolutely easy to recognize, right? The closest thing there is, because it's your very self. And for those who aren't prepared or who aren't exposed to the proper teaching, Atma seems far away and very difficult to understand. But one who knows oneself knows oneself as a timeless entity, because time is mithya. The only reality is you here. The only thing that's here is limitless Atma plus confused notions about that Atma. That's the only thing that's here. And a jnani knows, this is just my costume. The upadhi, this karya karana sanghata, this body, mind, sense conflict is just the costume I happen to be wearing in this incarnation, right? But the truth of me is free of all time. And so in that sense, you can understand that a sannyasi also is timeless. And I know Pujya Swamiji talked about his previous experience before he took sannyasa. And as I told Swamiji, it's more expeditious to ask for forgiveness than permission. So here we are. So I welcome the invitation to share some things. And I have to say, with all humility, I can say that I have one micro droplet of greater punya than Swamiji. And the only reason I say that is that I had the grace to meet Pujya Swamiji one day before Swamiji did. And if I'm recalling correctly, so I was studying, as Swamiji said, and I saw this poster on the wall, on a post. Tasmat, a poster. And I thought I knew the Swamis and who was teaching one. I never seen this one, but it conflicted with my Sanskrit class, third year Sanskrit class. We thought we were reading the Shankara Bhashya, Shankaracharya's commentary on the Garupada of the Mandukya Upanishad. We thought we were reading it, and in hindsight, we didn't have a clue. But we were doing our best, and it conflicted. And I've never ditched a class in my life. Ditching the class. I have never ditched a class in my life. This is the only time I did. So I ditched my Sanskrit class to go see the Swami. And I'll share my experience there in a little bit. But so I went to see Swami. I remember it so clearly, Pujya Swamiji teaching this class. And then I think he gave another class at a retirement home in Santa Barbara. And so we started studying with Radha. Radha is an exquisite teacher. She was with Pujya Swamiji in the old days. She knew Pujya Swamiji when he was living in a grass hut, or as he might say, a grass hut. You have to practice that hut, gata, that retroflex, the hut. And she knew him when he was, she had to take her morning bath in the Ganga, right? And then she was the ashram manager at Piercy, and then during the first course in Sailorsburg. And so we started studying with her. I started studying Gita Bhasha and Panini with her. And then we went to her classes, Tattva-bodha and other sorts of classes. And the reason why Pujya Swamiji came was because she was moving to Santa Barbara and she wanted some students, and that's how they did this. And then when Pujya Swamiji came and visited a couple times in Santa Barbara, I remember he'd give some public talks, and then we'd meet in his suite at the hotel, and we'd have these beautiful private talks. Like he would teach Sri Dakshinamurti Stotra to 3 of us. It was just, those were the halcyon days, I think, right? And I remember him looking at me, and he couldn't remember the dhyana shloka for the Sri Dakshinamurti Stotra, Maunam Vyakya Prakatita Para Brahma Tattvam Yivanam. And he kept looking at me saying, you know that one. And I said, Swamiji, I'm sorry, I don't have a clue. So I made sure I'd learned that, just in case the situation ever comes up again. But then we were gathered, I remember twice a week. On Thursdays, we would go to Swamiji's home, and we would listen to I remember the Mundaka Upanishad, I believe, the cassette tape. For you Gen Alpha folks, that's an MP3 in physical form. And we'd listen to that, and then I guess I have permission to say, and then the hot tub came, which he constructed himself, I think, by hand. This wooden barrel that was filled with hot water. It was wonderful. But Swamiji was always a Purushartha Viveki even then, because on Monday mornings he'd come to my place and we'd listen to more tapes and before he went to work. And one thing I remember Swamiji saying is why give the best hours of the day to your employer? He had his values straight, right? The morning is auspicious for puja and shravanam and meditation. So why give that? It's fine to give the rest of the day to your employer, but focus on what's important. And so if you do that first thing in the morning, moksha is the most important. So focus on that. And we were fond of taking some hikes in the Los Padres National Forest. And I remember having discussions with Swamiji of the challenges is trying to keep mantra japa going as you're wheezing, climbing up hills. Maybe that was a precursor to your love of leading yatras. I don't know your elevation gains in your trips that you led, but I'm sure that the early physical training that you had in Los Padres National Forest may have helped. And Swamiji was a tapaswan. We would have some birthday celebrations. There were maybe 4 or 5 of us that met together. And I remember that that Swamiji could never be convinced to have that second piece of pizza, no matter how much it was offered. No, Swamiji, here, take this one. And he said, no, that's enough. Puranoham. He actually, I think, once said, I kind of wish we never had to eat or sleep. I'd have more time in the day to do what's important. So then we found ourselves, I went a few months early. I was just biding my time until we bought the property in Sailorsburg. And I went there early to help with construction. I didn't know anything about construction. And that's maybe why they just finished tearing down some of the buildings that I hammered nails into at Sailorsburg. But we did what we could. And during the course, we were all building the facilities there. The temple wasn't there. And I remember Swamiji saying that he had talked to Puja Swamiji saying, there's this tool shed. Can we convert this tool shed into just a little sacred space? And Puja Swamiji said, no. Puja Swamiji said, no, we need to do it properly. But he was I remember a project of us installing the phone systems. He was the brain, I was the brawn. But I remember pulling wire for the inter-room phone systems there. But even then, Swamiji was a sadhu at heart, because there were a bunch of Westerners who didn't quite know the proper protocol within an ashram environment, which was meant to be contemplative and quiet. And so to seek solitude and quietude, Swamiji set up a tent in the forest. Now, there used to be almost a forest back there. Many of the trees have been trimmed back. But I don't know how many months Swamiji spent in a tent by himself in the forest just for that silence and solitude. I tried that because we were building the housing there. So during the summer programs, we didn't have enough accommodation for all the people who were coming to the summer camps. And so some of us were asked to find other accommodations, either off-site or I said, oh, okay, wonderful paradigm. I'll set up a tent in the same area. Unfortunately, I came down with a terrific case of poison ivy. I don't know how Swamiji managed it, but hey, Bhagavan, poison ivy is a wonderful tapas. The word tapas comes from the dhatu tap, which means to burn. So there is some friction. When you follow dharma, when you choose yoga karma sukhasalam, one definition of yoga that Sri Krishna says is yoga is expertise in action. And I was driving with a Swami from a different tradition one time, and he was extolling the virtues of some fellow who was an expert in their profession. And I just thought, that's not really it. Puja Swamiji made it very clear. It's one who has dharma, adharma, viveka, right? And if you have dharma and adharma viveka, you know what's appropriate, what's the ahimsa paramo dharma. You know that compassion and non-injury is the highest dharma. And sometimes doing what is to be done does not match with our desire system, does not match with our ragas and dveshas. So can the wise charioteer take hold of the reins, as is described in the Kathopanishad, and keep on the correct course? So there's a friction between what I want to do and what I value and what I should do. So following dharma is its own tapas. And trying to accommodate the body when it's screaming for attention and just saying, "Tatastu, I'll scratch you later," you know. You know, there we would practice Maunam sometimes once a day, because many of us feel like everybody wants to know exactly what I want to say, which is not true. And lastly, one more story is that the first Mahashivaratri there, Friday, it was February or March, we had this idea to shave our heads. We'd leave the chikha there, right? And we were known as the Dhoti brothers because we were the only two people who wore dhotis. So other Gurubhais called us the Dhoti brothers. And I remember washing dhotis there. It's like, we did the sadhu thing is to wash the dhoti in a bucket and hang it out. I remember breaking the ice off the dhoti in the morning to put it on. And we were both front row sitters. I don't know, I was in the second row. We were close to the front. And so somewhere I have a picture of me with my head half shaved. I don't know if I have the same for Swamiji. But we thought it seemed like an appropriate thing to do. And so we were there and we were sitting and, we would fast and chant, we would chant Om Namah Shivaya all day. And our co-students would come and they saw us and they thought we'd come from ISKCON. They thought that we were Hare Krishnas. And they said, Hare Krishnas don't chant Om Namah Shivaya. What's up? And I don't know if Puja Swamiji saw us or he caught wind of this. And that's when he invited us up. I don't know if Swamiji was given a Nama Diksha, but that's when we were given Mantra Diksha and Nama Diksha. Very beautiful. I have a problem because whenever I talk about Puja Swamiji, but that's okay. And so we're all blessed by this Arsha Parampara because Puja Swamiji was traditional but not orthodox. If he was orthodox, he wouldn't have given Shweta Mukhis like us, Caucasian white folks sannyasa, let alone women. And we're blessed because he did not present a belief system. He did not present a philosophical system. He presented this as a living tradition that offers aparoksha jnanam, direct knowledge, not indirect knowledge, right? There's no teacher within our parampara who talks about an Atma. I was sitting having lunch with someone at the Guru Pukulam a few years ago, and he kept talking about, I want to know the Atma. I want to know the Atma. And I didn't actually reach for his hand, but virtually I reached for his hand and said, there's no Atma, there's only Atma, right? And we use the word immediate knowledge. We don't necessarily mean instant knowledge. We mean unmediated knowledge. And mediated knowledge is indirect knowledge. Like Parvado Vanhiman Dhumavatvat Yatha Mahanasaha. So I may say, there's fire up on the hill. Swamiji, I don't see any fire, but there's smoke. Well, how do you know there's fire? You're just seeing the smoke. I have direct knowledge of the smoke, but the fire is inferred. How do I know? Because I know the vyapti, I know the invariable concomitants, the invariable relationship. Yatra dhumaha tatra tatra vanihi. Wherever there's smoke, there's fire, just like in the kitchen, right? If you're burning breakfast. And so that's an indirect knowledge, but you only need indirect knowledge for something that is away from you in time or space. Oh, I forgot to do this. I'm very strict on who I teach. And I need to make sure everybody here has the fundamental requirements for this study. And I'm very serious. If you cannot answer yes to both of these questions, I may have to ask you to leave. My students know that I'm very strict on this. The fundamental requirements for this study. Are you here? If you're not here, raise your hand. Oh, good, everybody's here. What does that mean? So I can get away with that because I'm a silly California Swami. You're here, you're present, you exist. You are an existent entity. Fundamental requirement 1. Second requirement, are you awake? If you're not awake, ask your neighbor to nudge you to wake you up. What do I mean? You're awake. You express awarefulness. You are an awareful, existent entity. That is the truth of yourself. You are Sat Chit Swarupaha. Your very nature is existence and awareness, or existent awareness, or even awareful existence. Those are just 2 ways to look at the same vastu. Ontologically or epistemologically, there's that you're the one entity. So you're here, you're absolutely present to make a mistake about yourself. You're absolutely here to inquire into that mistake, and you're absolutely here for the truth of yourself to be revealed. And Pujya Swamiji knew this. We're not making dosa here. This is not theory and practice. It's not where you have a recipe that you have to understand theoretically. This is a big problem. And then you have to go experience Atma. Atma is never not experienced. There's no experience without awareness, right? Atma is ever present. And we don't need a new experience. We need to understand the truth of every experience, right? Moksha, it sounds a bit audacious. Moksha is here for the taking, right? And the reason I say we're not making dosa, how do you make dosa? I apologize for those who've heard this before. You take the urad dal, you add some methi, you soak that separately from the rice for a few hours, you grind them together, you put them in the Instant Pot, you put it on the yogurt setting, you let it rise. If it doesn't rise, you may add a little fruit salt if you want, and then you take it out, you heat the tava, you sprinkle a little water on the tava to make sure it's at the right temperature. Maybe put some sesame oil. You pour a little batter. You move it around. If you're in a restaurant, you move it around to get those paper dosas, right? Sprinkle a little oil around the edges. Flip it. When one side is done, you take and you flip it over. You let the other side cook. Oh, I forgot the salt again. I'm sorry. You add salt along there, and then when it's done, you give it to the dog because the first dosa never turns out. You know what I'm talking about, right? We're not giving a recipe for some further practice. This is a pramana this is a means of knowledge for direct recognition, which is wielded by the guru, right? Practice itself means you do something. Action can transform that which is subject to transformation. Your character is subject to transformation. Your mind is subject to transformation. Your heart is subject to transformation. You can make your character more sattvika, right? You can quieten the mind and open the heart. Atma is not transformable, right? So when you do a practice, it's all in service of the knowing. The doing is in service of the knowing. And so what my first talk I heard from Pujya Swamiji was really a sort of a paraphrase of what Shankaracharya states in his Adhyasa Bhashya, the very first statement. His Shankaracharya, you all know who Shankaracharya is. He wrote the oldest extant, the oldest existent commentaries on a Prasthanatraya, the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, and the Brahma Sutra. And his magnum opus is this short introduction to the Brahma Sutra called the Adhyasa Bhashya. And in that, he lays out a problem of avidyaja adhyasaha, that I don't know who I am, and that allows me to mistake myself for who I am. And he starts off saying, Yushmat asmat pratyaya gochara yoho vishaya noho tamaf prakashavat viruddha swabhava yoho. It's a long sentence. Shankaracharya is not afraid of a run-on sentence. But to simplify and to change the vocabulary a little bit, so Pujya Swamiji started off saying, there's only 2 things in the world. My very first talk, that I heard. Only two things in the world: me and everything else. One method of analysis, you bifurcate the problem space, right? Only two things in the world: me and everything else. And he said, we have a very epidermis-based sense of self. Start where the skin is, and I'm everything inside, right? And what's outside of there is the world. And that was his starting point. And so to paraphrase the Tyasa Bhashya, there's two things. There's idam pratyaya vishaya and aham pratyaya vishaya. There's the referent of the word this and the referent of the word I, right? And idam is a sarvanama. It can stand for anything. Idam is a pronoun. It's a variable. And anything can fit into that variable. So through this Atma and Atma Vichara, Pujya Swamiji led the understanding that everything can fit into this pronoun this. This picture, this floor, this table, this body, this thought, this emotion, this knowledge, this ignorance. All of that can be placed in idam. And the knower and the known, the Vishayi and the Vishaya, are as different as light and darkness, having absolutely contradictory attributes. And so this was his first talk was a paraphrase of the same thing, right? And when I heard, he was able to start his talk that way because he knew that we were all fully qualified with the fundamental qualifications to understand this and to understand who we really are. Now, there's secondary qualifications we talk a lot about, sadhana, chatushtaya, viveka, vairagya, shatkat sampatti, shama dhamma upariti titiksha, shraddha samadhanam, mukshitvam ityadi. Right? I'm sure Swamiji has talked about all of those. Amanatvam, adambitvam, ahimsa, kshantararjavam. There's things you can do to prepare yourself for this knowledge so that it's clear and it's your living reality. That's what jnana nishtha is. Jnana nishtha is holding this so effortlessly, this knowledge so effortlessly that it's just your living. It informs your knowledge, informs all experience, right? And it's your living reality. And Pujya Swamiji knew this. Otherwise, he wouldn't be teaching, right? He wouldn't. Some unknowns at a college. He said, "Oh, you can see this right now." So the understanding, the end point of this Atma and Atma Vichara, this Drikdrisha Viveka, is not mystical. You can see it in real time right now. There's more to be said about the reality of everything you just jettisoned from your self-identity, but that's a different topic. And so it is like, sometimes I feel like a prop comic. You know what a prop comic is? Anyway. So the end game of this teaching is related to the text I'm taking at the Gurukulam right now. I'm taking a text called Hasta Malakiyam, or Hasta Malaka. And that's a name that Shankaracharya gave to one of his disciples. He met this boy. And to make a long story short, Shankaracharya says, Kahatvam, who are you? And then this boy came out with this beautiful 12 verses, very meditative verses about the nature of the self. And Shankaracharya said, this boy understands so clearly the truth of himself that I will name him Hasta Malaka. Hasta Malaka means the one who sees the reality of themselves as clearly as they see the amla fruit, the apple. This is an iPhone. As clearly as one sees the apple, the fruit on one's hand. The difference is that you can't bring Atma out in front of you and look at it. Atma is the subject. You can't bring awareness out and objectify it. But these are beautiful, beautiful meditative verses. As I said, there are things you can do to prepare for this, for the pramana to function. The scope of action is within your purview to decide. Kartum shakyam akartum shakyam, anita kartum shakyam. You can choose to do something, you can choose not to do something, you can choose to do something differently. Shankara says, ashwaina gacchati, padbhyam gacchati, na gacchati, anita gacchati. He says, you can choose to go by horse, back in the day. You can choose to walk someplace. You can choose not to go, or you can choose to, I guess, hop on one foot and go. So action is Purusha Tantra. It's dependent on the will and the jnana, icha, and kriya shakti of the jiva, right? The skill set, the knowledge, and the desire or imagination of the individual. Moksha is not a function of action. Moksha is a function of a pramana. So let's say I want to see the sunset. I live on the West Coast, not far from the ocean. So I have to choose to get up, walk out of my kutir, walk to the ocean, walk to the cliff where the ocean is, sit down. Is that sufficient? No. Shraddhavan labhate jnanam. You cannot approach this teaching with crossed arms, figuratively. Yeah, if you're doing it now, don't worry about it. I see people there. Everybody's, oh no, Swamiji. No, mentally, right? Shraddha does not mean faith. Buddha Swamiji would say a faith pending understanding. I like to call it a trusting inquisitiveness. You trust that with the words coming out of your guru's mouth are commensurate and in line with the vision of the rishis of ancient India. There's an open-mindedness. And Shraddha is actually a suspension of belief and disbelief, right? We often filter what is being heard through our preconceived notions. We're all very earnest seekers, and we often commit to these various ideas. We pick and choose from various traditions, and we place those in front of what we're hearing, right? I'll take a little bit of this and a little bit of that, very eclectic. But often that stops us from really hearing what's being said because we're in real time trying to filter what is being communicated through the scaffolding of all of these beautiful ideas we've collected before. And so Shraddha is actually putting that filter aside just so you can hear. And then you can question the heck out of it. Questioning is encouraged in this tradition. There's a whole Upanishad called Prashna Upanishad. Sri Krishna was peppered by Arjuna with question after question, right? In fact, questioning is encouraged such that it's actually part of the mananam. Mananam is bringing your intellect to bear on what you've heard. And in Shankaracharya's bhashas, he brings in other schools of thought, other objections, this whole dynamic of Purva Paksha Siddhanta. Someone will say, well, isn't it this way? And there'll be long discussions. And so bring your questions to the teacher because this is not a belief system. I once, I think, made the mistake. I was giving satsang in Rishikesh. And just one satsang. And there was a course going on. And I had the audacity to say, don't believe a word the teacher tells you. The meaning behind that was understand, just don't believe. So Shraddha is not belief. Shraddha is a trust that there's something valuable that the teacher has to say, that the Shruti has to say, and put aside your preconceived notions just to hear, and then question it to see if what was taught holds water. Right? So if I sit there with my sukshma sharira arms closed, it ain't going to work. Right? So approach the teaching with an open mind and an open heart. And don't swallow it. Right? Don't just swallow it. And one thing you can offer to Bhagavan is this silly notion that I'm so impure, I'm so unworthy, I will never gain moksha. We put these rishis up on these pedestals and we say they're so pure, they're so evolved, it'll take me lifetimes to get to their level of purity. I'm just this small little individual I'll never understand. Put that aside. That's rubbish. Right? If I go to the ocean and I sit there with my eyes closed, nothing's going to happen. if I put myself in a position for the pramana to function, if I open my eyes, I've done the necessary prerequisite work, I open my eyes and my will is suspended. Because knowledge is not Purusha Tantra. Knowledge is not dependent on my own decision and action. Knowledge is Vishaya Tantra and Pramana Tantra. It's dependent upon the object being present and the pramana functioning. I open the eyes, I can't help but see the sunset. We're all wait. It's almost like a ritual in California. Everybody gathers and watches the sunset, and everybody's looking for the green flash. You know what a green flash is? You know, when the sun sets below the horizon, there's often this really short green flash. Oh, how auspicious, you know. But it's outside of, it has nothing to do with my will. And that's a situation you have with a teacher, right? You put you put yourself in the way of the pramana. You expose yourself to the pramana, and you have a trust that there's something valuable here. And what the guru says should be taken extremely personally. Because we're not talking theoretically, we're not talking about some Atma, we're talking about the Swatasiddha Swapakasha Atma that's right here, that just happens to be mistaken. Do we have a hard out at 11, or we should stop? Okay.
No, take your time.
Okay. Some say that Swamis wear, some mark on their forehead. It should be the off button, but sometimes it's very hard to find the off button for a Swami. I'll wrap up, but the reason why this is a living teaching, right? It's not just the Shruti; it's the Shruti as expressed through the Guru. Guru Upadishta Upanishad Vakya, right? It's the teaching of the rishis of ancient India that comes through the Guru. It's a living tradition. And the reason is it's a very nuanced teaching, because you can't bring the Atma out in front. How, within duality, do you talk about non-duality? How do you talk about something that the scope of language is jati, guna, kriya, and sambandha? That's the domain of language. It talks about categories, it talks about guna, qualities, it talks about kriya, action, it talks about sambandha, relationship. Atma has none of those. Atma has no jati. Doesn't belong to a certain category or of anything. It has no gunas, nirguna. Atma if you understand awareness and existence, you can apply these ideas directly and say they don't apply here. Atma has no action, and Atma has no relationship, because it takes two to tango, and there's no other than Atma, right? So the normal use of language doesn't suffice here. And so is in a sense, it's a skill. The teaching is a skill and the art. And so Shankara says, someone who is not a sampradayavit, who does not know the traditional teaching methodologies, should not be attended to, should be ignored as you would ignore a blockhead, a murka. You look in the Sanskrit English dictionary, one of the definitions of a murka is a blockhead. I don't know what that meant in the day. I think of Charlie Brown when I think of blockhead. And so Shankara says in chapter 13, the Bhashya, verse 13 or 14, depending how you're counting, he says, Sampradaya vidam vachanam adhyaropa apavadabhyam nishprapancham prapanchate. Those who know the traditional teaching methodology say there's a certain technique that's used to make the unmanifest clear in the process of teaching. Sometimes we use laksha and lakshartha and vachartha, the immediate meaning of words and implied meaning of words. This is one teaching technique. But the metta prakriya, the metta technology, metta teaching method can be considered adhyaropa apavada. What this is, it was very confusing, because people say, Swamiji, you're supposed to be teaching non-duality, but when you did this drik drish viveka, Swamiji did this seer-seen analysis, this Atma and Atma analysis, what had previously been just inspirational and aspirational became as clear as the fruit on the palm of the hand. I'd open the Viveka Chudamani and I would be inspired, I'd read one shloka before meditation. I failed to recognize there's a whole, several methods of unfoldment of the reality of oneself that is contained within that book. And we can say that I may be banished from the Swami Club if I tell this secret, because it's almost magical. It's adhyaropa means superimposition, but it's intentional superimposition. What it really means is adopting a provisional acceptance of duality, of the shishya's dualistic experience, to show a particular point, and then removing that dualistic perspective, that framing, to reveal the absolute truth, the paramartika drishti. So we use the vyavaharika drishti, the vyavaharika satta, an acceptance, like Puja Swamiji did. We have this common understanding. The perceiver is different than the perceived. In the end, that isn't true. But it gets us to understand that. It gets us a long way. This is why I use the word awareness instead of consciousness. Because I read a book I read an article from the Scientific American that says, consciousness is everything you think. That's not Atma Chaitanya. And it's just a choice. Maybe if you understand what they mean by consciousness, then that's fine. Everything you think is manasa vyapara. It's mental activity. Awareness is that which illumines all psycho-emotional dynamics, right? It illumines all thought, all emotions. And so I can also do this wordplay. So I am aware of that which I'm aware of. I am the awarer of the awared. Work with me here. And that's a dualistic notion, right? But then you can say, but the swarupa of the awarer is awareness. Because trich, in Sanskrit, indicates a doer, but Atma is not a doer. The sun is not an illuminator of the moon. The sun is sheer luminosity. And when the moon is there, we call it an illuminator. Right? When the mind is there, we call it a sakshi. But in and of itself, Atma is just a self-luminous awareness. So we use this provisional acceptance of duality, and then we pull the rug out from that. Even the Mahavakya. Okay, you think you're an individual, and you think God is separate from you. Let's start there. Shankara says that compares the Shruti to a mother, right? Who leads the child by the hand for their own good. And so we say, okay, Tvam, you are an individual. Alpagniha, Alpashakti Man, right? You're an individual with limited knowledge and limited skill. Ishwara is the opposite. Sarvashaktiman, Sarvagniha, all-knowing, all powerful. And then we use that as a framework for analysis to understand that there really is no difference. We talk about a pratyagatma, an inner self. There is no inner self, but framing the vichara, the inquiry into that, helps us understand a lot about the self. We posit samsara, our experience is samsara. This vyavaharika experience anubhava is, we suffer, right? And therefore, there is a solution to that suffering, which is called moksha. And when you do the purushartha vichara, when you understand the inability of the world to really give you what you're looking for, then you focus on moksha. Because we don't want to put band-aids on our boo-boos. We want to solve the fundamental human universal problem of suffering. And moksha is that. And so the tradition promotes tivra mumukshutvam, intense desire for moksha, as one who is a diptashiras, one whose hair is on fire, runs and jumps headfirst into the pond to extinguish the fire. That is the one desire that's heavily promoted within this tradition, right? And in the end, Shankaracharya says, you are nitya muktaha. You are already free. But you cannot short-circuit that situation. You have to work within your current experience. You can't say, oh, I'm already free, and then, And so we create a provisional dualistic perspective, and then we pull the rug out from it. We posit Maya, right, as a parinami upadana karanam, as a transformative cause of the creation. And in the end we say, Yama iti maya. Maya doesn't really exist. It's just mithya. And so it takes a Shrotriya, right? You've all heard Pariksha Lokan Karma Chitan Ityadi. Someone who sees through the fallacy of trying to find Purnatvam, fullness in the world, Tad Vijnanartam Saha Gurum Eva Abhigachet. May he approach a teacher for knowledge of that. So the Mumukshu has now become a Jignasu. Because as in the Alice in Wonderland, and as George Harrison quoted, I'm from California, so I can quote George Harrison and the Beatles, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. If you don't know the sadhya, you don't know the sadhana. If you don't know the nature of the problem, you don't know the solution to the problem, therefore you don't know the way to get to the solution. If you don't know the sadhya, you don't know the sadhana, the means to that. If you don't know that the problem of samsara, of suffering, of constant struggle, is not knowing the nature, is ignorance, then you become subject to all sorts of snake oil salesmen. You become a mumukshu, you can say, oh, there's got to be something more. And then you look on YouTube, Swamiji notwithstanding, and said, oh, no, you need to cleanse your, as they say in California, you need to cleanse your chakras, right? Or yoga will do it. Well, tell me, how long do you have to stand on your head to gain moksha? How bendy do you need to be to gain moksha, right? How many crystals do you need, right? If you don't understand the sadhya, you don't understand the means to the solution to that. And so the transformation is one of the jobs of a guru, to transform a mumukshu to a jignasu, from one who understands that there's a problem to one who understands the nature of the problem and the nature of the solution. If self-ignorance is the problem, self-knowledge is the solution. How do you gain knowledge? You gain knowledge through a pramana. A pramana is a means of knowledge. And the guru is the pramana incarnate. If he's a Shrotriya, if he's a Brahmanishta means two different things. Brahmani nishtha yasya saha. Either one who has the commitment to understanding reality, which we call Brahman. Atma and Brahman are actually synonyms, depending on the initial starting point of vichara. If you start in the Mahavakya, if you start your inquiry from the jiva, we call the result of that, the truth of the jiva, is called Atma. When you start your inquiry from the creation or from Bhagavan, the swarupa of Bhagavan we call Brahman. But there's only ekameva advitiyam, one vastu, right? And so you could say the truth of the wave is water, the truth of the ocean, the samashti upadi, is just water. There's only one water. There's only one vastu, right? We can call it wave water and ocean water, but it's just water. Some people say Brahmatma, because there's one entity. But it takes someone who's committed to understanding this, or one for whom this is their living reality, right? And one who knows his stuff, one who knows the material and understands, who is a sampradaya of it, who can wield the shruti as a pramana. Because this parampara is amazing. If your guru has the vision of his guru, if the guru's drishti is the vision of his guru, and he was enlightened, and that is the rishi, the arsha drishti, the arsha vidya, right? If your guru has the same knowledge as that of the rishis, just through language, one can come to understand, have that same knowledge. Words can create direct knowledge if the object that's being revealed is present right here, right now. And the guru, who's a Shrotriya and a Brahmanishta, is the pramana, right? Who's able to use the communication skills, the learning, and his own insight. When a true guru teaches, it's like an open-eyed nididhyasana. He's just sharing with you what he sees, right? And you happen, and your punya is sufficient for you to be sitting here listening. And I'm convinced that you're quite blessed to have the Swamiji here as as your guru, because I'm sure he can lead you to this vision of your inherent wholeness and freedom. Om Tat Sat.
Swamiji, thank you so much. That was wonderful to hear you teach Advaita Vedanta very nicely. And I can turn it down a little bit. And wonderful to hear some of the stories of our time in Santa Barbara. Story I quite forgot. my memory is not very good. So just
Same here. That's the iPad.
Oh, that's external memory.
Exactly.
All right. I do hope you can, Swamiji is continuing to teach his camp on Hasta Malakiya at Arsha Vidya Gurukulam. If you'd like to go, if they want to come out today or tomorrow, Swamiji, what is your schedule?
So we have 4 more classes. We've covered a lot of the ground material. So these next shlokas will go by fairly quickly, but we have a class at 4 today, and then a class at 7:30, and then 2 tomorrow. The first one's at 7 a.m. So we're having classes instead of satsang and meditation. So 2 tomorrow morning and 2 this evening. First one's at 4 o'clock. And it's streamed on YouTube.
So you can go to Arsha Vidya if you want to hear Swamiji in person, or as he said, these classes are available online. Also, many of his other teachings are available online. He has a very nice website. You can go and look to it. Thank you very much for coming today. Swamiji, I hope if you come out to this part of the country, I hope you will come again and come and address us. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you so much.
Conclude with a prayer. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Ma Amritangamaya Om Shanti 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 Om Tat Sat.
Om Tat Sat.